So, I've been gone a while, and even though I was too busy to post any reviews, I still planned to post some trailer highlights to keep you up to speed with what was coming soon. I didn't do that, life said no, and I grew frustrated with each release I missed that I wanted to share ahead of time. Especially films I thought would be great, like One Battle After Another, quirky, like Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, internet relevant, like Iron Lung, blockbustery, like Project Hail Mary, or discussion-worthy, like The Drama. One of those films was Obsession. When the trailer dropped, I had a feeling it would stand out, knowing nothing about the production or the fact that it was written and directed by Curry Barker, someone I don't think I've ever heard of before, despite his online popularity as a storyteller preceding him. I just went with my gut, and my gut told me Obsession was going to blow up. So I was excited to pause my absence just to post the trailer highlight, only to miss that release date as well. And what do you know? I was right. The film exploded, cracking over $200 million at the box office here at home and over $400 million worldwide. And I was pissed. Not at Obsession, but at the fact that I failed to post a highlight for the one horror flick to trigger my spidey sense since Weapons. So as a form of redemption, I promised myself it'd be the first film I reviewed upon returning to the channel. While I saw that it was well received, I didn't watch or read anything about it because I like doing my reviews blind and in real time. All I know is what I saw in the trailer. A dude makes a wish, and some chick makes crazy face. My hope is that I actually like it, because the kind of horror that goes viral isn't usually the kind I enjoy from a narrative standpoint, and having a hunch that it'd do well doesn't mean I assumed it'd be good. So, let's find out if I hate it, or if it'll be my new obsession. Welcome to Stream Come True, where nothing is spoiler-free. So the film begins with a shot of our main character, Bear, played by Michael Johnston, a name that absolutely has an extra letter in it, and he's struggling to express himself to a woman unseen, who we're led at this point to believe is named Nikki. He starts by describing his feelings for Nikki, and there's a lot in this scene that reflects a world we've grown familiar with. An unassuming guy who's socially awkward, at least where women are concerned, or where this woman is concerned, trying to build up the courage to confess his love. A dude in a backwards cap heckling from the sidelines that the guy's emotions are cringe, making him even more hesitant to be vulnerable. And a gal who turns out not to be Nikki, taking precious time out of her day to help this guy work through his lady issues, despite that not being her job, and finding his confession sweet, actually, only to be silenced by the aforementioned dude for expressing an opinion he doesn't agree with. I've said before, and if I haven't, just pretend that I have, that I love films that manage to establish things like tone, characterization, even plot in the very first scene without spelling it out. And I know what I'm in for here. A tightly contained, seemingly relatable story about a bear desperate for a picnic basket full of Nikki, only with this unsettling undertone I attribute at the start to Michael's performance, which is off-putting in a good way. A lot of stuttering and pausing that makes me irrationally angry. There are also some details in the dialogue that stood out for what it reveals about their relationships. When Ian, the heckling friend played by Cooper Tomlinson, suggested asking Nikki out for drinks, Bear said they've gone out for drinks, but she always invites Ian. And Ian said, yeah, exactly. Which was either a dig at Bear, implying that Nikki doesn't want to be alone with him, or a hint that Ian might be more than just a third wheel. Or maybe it was neither of those things. I don't know. I'm only 5 minutes in. He also encouraged Bear to wait until the right time to ask Nikki out, because all he has is time. And it felt like foreshadowing, not just commentary on how little Bear has going on in his life. So Bear heads home to find that his cat died, having gotten into some pills, which is curious considering I've never met a cat that could open a bottle of meds, so put that in your pocket and lock it. And he cleans up the place, putting Meow Meow's poor little body in the trash before sobbing in his room. I love that the music felt dreamy and distorted here, like sinking peacefully underwater until the light from the surface recedes and you're left floating in darkness. And I appreciated Bear muttering the line, "Why can't she?" suggesting that his tears weren't for Necro Kitty, but him being overwhelmed by his desperation for Nikki. And good news, everyone. While Bear is scrolling through Nikki's socials like a super well-adjusted friend, she calls, letting him know that she's quitting her job. She wants to see him, stating that they're running out of time, which felt out of place there, before mentioning that her crystal necklace fell down the drain. And I'm not doing a pointless play-by-play of the film here. There's a reason I recount what I recount. Trust the process. So Bear agrees to meet up with Hey Nikki You So Fine, despite feeling down in the dumps. But he first heads to a curio shop to buy her a new necklace. This scene was interesting because the cashier explains that each stone has its own energy, with the amethyst being for calm and clarity, and the rose quartz attracting love. Given Bear's situation, you might think he'd choose the quartz. Instead, he asks which stone is best for good vibes. And the cashier, still doing her job despite being on the phone, so kudos to her, recommends the citrine, comparing it to sunshine. So far, Bear seems like that guy, the one who's harmless in theory, albeit a little sad and a lot infatuated, and who cares about making his crush happy, even deciding against the citrine because he thought Nikki wouldn't like it. This is when he spots something across the way, nestled between a magic eye and a voodoo doll, which is how I feel these days. A one-wish willow. Something that, would you believe based on its name, grants a wish. He decides to buy it and exchanges hecka bants with the cashier about how the willow is very popular, but some people complain after using it. Maybe because nothing happens, maybe because death happens, who can say? So we're 11 minutes in, and we've already been introduced to the catalyst for the horrors to come. That split second when Bear thinks of himself before Nikki, because there was nothing to suggest that he was drawn to the willow for her. As an aside, in my headcanon, if the willow works, everything they sell works, but let's stay on task. Bear meets up with Shmi and Shmicky and their other friend Shmara, aka Sarah, played by Megan Lawless, who I immediately Googled to see if she was related to Lucy Lawless, because she's my warrior princess. But no, they're not related, and I'll spare you the veggies to get to the meat. There's some exposition drips like, I am a writer, I am an artist, there's a gun in the break room, which I'm sure is not going to come to play later, and Bear offers to give Nikki a ride home because she's had enough fun for the night. On the way, she tells him she's sorry about the cat, and the mood is more solemn, more intimate, giving you a sense of their closeness. It's also the first time anyone refers to Bear by his real name, Baron, which I'd argue should remain a title, not something you call your child on purpose. And this is where the cracks begin to show. Bear mentions how weird it's going to be not seeing Nikki every day, because their friend group works at the same place, which is why it mattered that Nikki is quitting. She says she just isn't happy there, and Bear makes a face I didn't know at the time I was writing this that I'm going to become fairly accustomed to over the course of the film. Something between needing to shit and smelling a shit. And he says, "It's just a job, Nikki." Right. Now we know whose feelings Bear prioritizes when Nikki's happiness conflicts with his own. Buying her a gift is easy, but being deprived of the right to see her every day, that's a bridge too far. Seeing her is enough to make the job worth it to him, whether he's happy or not. Why isn't seeing him enough for her? So I liked that exchange, especially the part where Nikki says she's writing a love story, not a romance, and Bear doesn't understand the difference. To me, romance is the aesthetic, the things you say and do that are deemed romantic, the gestures, the places, the moods, the gifts, while love is the emotion and all the joy and chaos that comes with. Barker said a lot about Bear without Bear saying a lot, and in this writer's humble opinion, that's good. That's a good thing he did. Unfortunately, I then had to suffer through one of the most infuriating moments of the film that I've also had the displeasure of witnessing in real life. When Bear drops Nikki off, Nikki asks point blank if he likes her, and makes it 100% crystal that if he does, now is the time to say so. And this emotionally constipated broccoli Rob, this stunted baked potato skin, says no. So Nikki heads inside, and out of frustration, Bear reaches into his bag, pulls out the willow, and says the magic words. I wish Nikki Freeman loved me more than anyone in the fucking world. Nice touch with the music cutting out on the snap. It isn't a new thing, but I'm a sucker for it. And oh boy, we are off to the races, cause Nikki comes back, and the kids aren't all right, streamers. Something is up. And we see Bear glance back at the willow, clearly wondering if it's the wish. Who, me? Couldn't be. She's just drunk or high, and she says so, conveniently. It's important to note that what happened right before the wish affects how it informs Bear's character, because you would think that being aggravated with himself for pretending not to like Nikki would lead him to wish that he could tell her how he feels. Instead, he wishes to control how she feels, because he's a coward, comfortable in that skin, who knows he can't handle rejection. Him confessing his love isn't the problem. It's the chance that she may not love him back, so he removed that variable from the equation. I won't explain just how off Nikki's behavior is, but it's very well done, and you'll see it yourself when you watch the film if you haven't already, which you should have, because what do you think nothing is spoiler-free means? It means I'm going to spoil things, so you should never watch my reviews before watching what I'm reviewing. But congrats to Indy Navarrete, who plays Nikki, for nailing whatever this is. Anyway, Nikki convinces Bear that she can't be alone because she's upset about her dad dying, meaning in the process of, not having done. And she asks to go to his place, which it turns out was his nan's place until she too went necro like Neko. They arrive, and as expected, Bear is being a gentleman. He gives Nikki his bed, asks if she needs anything, and heads off to sleep in another room. Only Nikki coaxes him back, begging him to sleep next to her. He obliges, not that saying yes was all that difficult for him, so he gets in bed, over the covers, still trying to be decent with a capital D, and Nikki tries to kiss him. He hesitates at first, telling her to wait, and she does for a second. But they kiss, and it gets heavy until Nikki freaks out, which freaks Bear out. As quickly as she pulled away, she reassures him that everything's fine, except it's obviously not fine, so Bear states for the record that she kissed him, yet she's making him feel like he did something wrong. She swears that he didn't, she just had a panic attack, and I'll again give 10 points to Indy for how she's navigating the whiplash of her character's state of mind, because the finer details of her performance shed light on what's happening to Nikki, and that would be lost if her acting was trash. Either way, the incident prompts Bear to search online to see if anyone else is saying that the one Wishful works, and the results are all over the place. What matters to me is that it's the second time we've seen Bear make this tentative connection between Nikki's behavior and his wish. Only, barring cultural and religious beliefs, most people don't jump to the conclusion that magic is real when something weird happens, however uncanny it is. So the film is straddling the line between the reality of the situation and the irrelevance of that reality. Because all of this boils down to what Bear wants to believe, regardless of the evidence, making it moot that the evidence is inconclusive. Is she high? Is she having a nervous breakdown? Is she jacked up on one wish willow juice? Who cares? She's there. Cue Nikki being creepy, though it's really the lighting, or lack thereof. We've seen her framed in silhouette a few times now, and by a few I mean 2, unless it wasn't 2, in which case I didn't mean that. But we get it. The featureless shadow vaguely resembling Nikki's form is bad. She again begs Bear to sleep next to her, and he again hesitates before conceding, et voila, it's a new day, and stuff happens that I don't need to tell you. Jump to the music store they all work at, where Bear tells Ian about the night before, and that Nikki needs help because she's acting cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, which I personally wasn't. Something about the flavor in chocolate cereals tasted off to me, even as a kid. And Bear's concern seems genuine, but there's a blink and you'll miss it moment, whatever the ear equivalent of blinking is, where he mentions the part about Nikki asking him to lay next to her, and Ian is like, but you didn't, right? 'Cause that'd be kinda sketch. And Bear says no, he slept on the floor, which we know isn't true, calling for what's become one of my most precious mantras over the last decade because no one seems to understand it. Let's head into the dark place. 2 things can be true at once. It can be true that Bear is worried about Nikki's mental health, while also being true that he's self-interested in being with her in any way he can, even if some part of him knows it isn't right. And I hear you, if he exploits the situation at all, then he doesn't actually care about her. But that's not how humans work. People are often more complicated than the situations they're in, and they can have competing, conflicting emotions. Psychology exists for a reason. We aren't robots, nor are we clones. We're predictably flawed, albeit in different ways, and we can be good and bad, or stupid and smart, in equal measure. We can mock anti-vaxxers for rejecting science while attributing our personality traits to the date we were born. We can love the elderly parent we care for because they can no longer care for themselves while still being relieved when they're gone. We can know that smoking is bad for us and still somehow start doing it. So you can wag your finger because you'd never, but it doesn't change what is. It's far easier to judge situations externally than it is to work through them, especially when that situation is presented as a narrative that intentionally pits gray areas against black and white for the sake of social commentary, like a scripted film, or for the sake of reaction, like an Am I the Asshole subreddit. My point isn't that Bear's feelings for Nikki are pure. It's that the contradiction inherent to his feelings speaks directly to how broken he is. Not in a sympathetic way, but in a way that's concerning. Nikki is clearly going through it, but he's the one who needs help, because something happened to Nikki that made her like this, whereas Bear is just like this. So, Ian suggests that Nikki may be on Molly / ecstasy / MDMA / methylene dioxymethamphetamine again, which Bear agrees is likely, and which both of them seem far too casual about. I don't want my friends doing drugs at all, and I'm not a chicken, you're a turkey. So someone saying she isn't psycho, she's probably just tripping on chemicals, wouldn't make me feel better, nor would I think it made the kiss any less inappropriate. Unless I were Bear, who can further deflect from the creeping sensation that his wish is the culprit. Fast forward to the end of the day when Ian takes Nikki home instead of Bear, and Bear's behavior here is reminiscent of the kind of person who says they don't want a gift for their birthday, then is mad when you don't get them one. He's still trying to maintain this veneer of gentleman's virtue by expressing opposition to anything that may put he and Nikki in a compromising situation. In this case, him driving her home again. But he's visibly taken aback that she didn't want to go with him anyway, which ties into this broader theme of consent in a way that I preferred for its subtlety over the kissing scene. Because something shitty men used to say, long before the manosphere had a name, was that in order to get a woman to do what you want, you just have to make her think it was her idea. And whether you believe that or not, it is a common manipulative tactic, not exclusive to men, that alleviates one of the responsibility for the outcome of a decision because they were able to manufacture consent. The goal in their case is mainly just to get what they want, while Bear's goal is to get what he wants without being the bad guy. As long as Nikki consents, he's in the clear. And his expectation, given what's already happened, is that she will consent. So saying he wasn't sure he should take her home was just a formality, something to quiet his cognitive dissonance. Her not pushing back and begging to go like he assumed she would just wasn't a part of the plan. Not that it makes a difference, because she pops up at his house later anyway after his phone call with Ian, who says he spoke to Nikki about what Bear said, and she's fine. She wasn't even staring at him or nuttin', which is the most unrealistic part of this film. Not that Nikki said she's fine, but that any of them talked on the phone. I know it sounds like a generational stereotype, but the number of people I encounter these days who act like talking on the phone is the equivalent of having acid thrown on their face is disconcerting. Speaking of disconcerting, Nikki is doing her whole thing again, and she apologizes for her behavior, blaming it on drugs like Ian suggested, and the stuff with her dad, reassuring Bear once more that in spite of that, he didn't take advantage of her, which makes Bear defensive, since he knows he did take advantage and he doesn't want to confront that, even if she's giving him a pass. And I'm conflicted on where this scene goes. Until now, there's been an element of plausible deniability on Bear's part, contrasted with what we see as observers who already know this is a horror film and already know the wish worked. From Bear's perspective, yes, Nikki was acting strange, but maybe it was a coincidence. And that uncertainty, reinforced by the people around him, including Nikki, made his character the kind that, despite potentially being set up as a villain, is placed in a grayer context that opens the door to interpretation. 3 interpretations to be exact. Either you think Bear's a sack of shit right out of the gate because of how obsessed he is with Nikki and because he made the wish at all, despite wishing for things being an emotional outlet plenty of people entertain. I'll call this group A for apples. Or you think he's a victim of the wish himself because he didn't intend for it to work and doesn't derive any pleasure from watching Nikki's decline, let alone being burdened with the knowledge that he's to blame. I'll call this group B for bananas, which you're free to read into. Or you think it's both, because the fact that we're even having this debate is the point. There'd be no discussion, no meaningful commentary here if it was actually as black and white as one of the above. It'd just be another ham-fisted story about how predatory men are, even if they seem nice, or an overly sympathetic story about how lonely and unlucky men are despite being nice. So I'll call this group C for care, as in I don't care enough to argue about it. It's a film. And I suspect that where you land in your interpretation will be influenced somewhat by your social attitudes and lived experience, similar to the end of the animated film Spellbound, which I reviewed here on the channel, but had to move to Patreon. My issue, which may be a strong word for it, is that this scene undoes some of the uncertainty that kept Bear's character muddy, because Nikki expresses herself more believably, without the strangeness or panic, and reprises their pivotal exchange, asking how Bear feels as if rolling back the clock. Only this time she makes it easy for him, saying she knows he likes her and implying that she feels the same. And when Bear asks when she started liking him, she doesn't say something that would again trigger his concern about the wish, like, "I don't know, the night you took me home, Bear, is that right? Your cat died, I'm sorry about your cat." Instead, she says something normal, that it happened over time, starting at Christmas, and that the time they spent together the night before gave her a taste of what they could be. We know it's weird because she's doing shadow face, which sleep paralysis demons find very offensive, and she's speaking in that passive voice. She also said before that when she likes a guy, no one knows, yet here she is telling Bear outright. Is that out of character, or is Bear an exception? He doesn't know. And when she asks if admitting that she likes him would freak him out, it could have been her literally trying to understand if it'd be a good thing or not, similar to a scene earlier in the film that I didn't mention. But my issue isn't with what we think, it's about what Bear thinks. On one hand, Nikki doing this seemingly clear-headed 180 lets him off the hook by dispelling his concerns. If it wasn't the wish, and she's no longer under the influence, yet she still wants him, then the consent isn't manufactured, it's real. And I'm not sure I'm a fan of how that swings things more in his favor from a thematic perspective. On the other hand, from a story perspective, I like how it fits in with what I think is happening to Nikki, that she's either possessed or that's not her. So what we're seeing isn't Nikki being normal, it's the thing posing as Nikki being good at it. And I give it a 9 out of 10. I deducted a point for lighting. I will say that whether you're group A, B, or C, the next scene will be the turning point in the film. The only difference is if you feel that way going into it or looking back at it. Because after Bear realizes that this is the moment he's been waiting for, the right time to confess to Nikki, backed by the cathartic swell of music perfect for romance, he and Nikki have sex. And we get this montage of their relationship that I adore. Because the music says, "Aw," while the look on everyone's face says, "The fuck?" I also love the little image they share that, from where I was sitting, looked like it said "Abaja Babaja Bee," but up close, it said, "I want to wear your skin as a sweater." And I know for a fact I haven't said this on the channel, so for the kids in the back, it is the reddest of flags when someone says they want to wear your skin or crawl inside you. Anything serial killer adjacent. But the image is great because the fact that they're both into it proves how nutty Bear is. Nikki literally had to lose her damn mind for them to be on the same dating wavelength. Tell me that's not good characterization. Alas, all is not roses and peanut butter. Because as you could probably guess from the trailer, their Looney Tunes honeymoon phase starts to lose its luster. At least for Bear. And if I could nitpick not at all seriously for a moment, Bear says at dinner that people call him a closed book, and Nikki says the good thing about a closed book is you get to read it from the start. Excuse me? If it's a closed book, you can't read it, and you can open it on any page, so what on Mount Olympus was that supposed to mean? The answer is, I don't care. I know she wasn't trying to be literal, but I prefer my extended metaphor shaken, not stirred. If she wanted to make the point that him being closed off means she gets to know him from scratch, then say that, you poser. That's 8 out of 10 points now, Demon Nikki. Or Dickie. Can I call you Dickie? Just kidding, you can't answer. Also, what's going on here? There are extras on this side, extras on that side. Then, oop, where did they go? Psych, they were just squinched all the way up against the wall for some reason. Back to the story. Ian gives Bear a ring-a-ling and informs him that Nikki's dying father has a lying daughter because he's actually healthy as a push-pop. And he starts rambling about how something is wrong with Nikki because she said before that she wasn't into Bear like that, and now she's acting like she snapped into a whole new person. You know, snapped, like a twig or a one-wish willow. This is another turning point in the film, but one that's far darker. I just can't get into it yet because it's time for an intermission! Did you think I'd forget? Never! So why don't you grab a snack, don your crystal necklace, and like the video. Are you ready? Spaghetti! So there's an ass in my face because there's a sex scene. And thanks to the last scene I didn't explain, we've officially crossed into unambiguous villain territory where groups A, B, and C can all converge on a single point of agreement. Bear knows something is wrong with Nikki, not even his friends are excusing it anymore, and he still openly decides it doesn't matter. It makes the sex scene, which is thematically a rape scene, that much worse. Not just because he's knowingly sleeping with someone who, despite what she says, isn't in the right frame of mind to consent, but because there's a moment where it seems like the moans we hear are no longer coming from Nikki's mouth. It's like we get a glimpse of the real Nikki, what she's hearing and feeling behind her eyes that have gone dead. I said earlier that something had either possessed her or taken her place, and this scene made me think it's a mixture of both. That Dickie took over Nikki's body, but she isn't controlling her mind. They're both just in there, which is arguably worse because it means Nikki is a spectator in her own body, trapped in the female version of the sunken place where she has no agency. Her flesh is just being used to serve a purpose, one that isn't Dickie's, but Bear's. So at 45 minutes in, I'm looking forward to Bear having the day he deserves. Film-wise, the horror ramps up from here. There's a notable shift in the suspense. Dickie gets even more unsettling, and the simplicity of how everything is shot works well, especially with the confined spaces and Nikki's placement in the composition of each frame. The scene where Nikki gets up in the middle of the night is especially fantastic, and my theory based on that scene is that when Bear is asleep, Dickie sleeps, allowing Nikki to come up to the surface. So of course she'd get out of the bed. She doesn't want to lay with Bear, and she's likely too scared to go anywhere else. Because remember that when she broke through before, she didn't know where she was or how she got there. So I assume it's still like that, and she's just piecing together whatever she can in the few moments she's awake. Another great scene was when Bear realized that Nikki cut his hair, which is especially topical when dissecting consent through gender dynamics. Because cutting a man's hair without his permission, which in some places is considered battery, is one of the more common ways women violate men's bodily autonomy. Yet it's treated like nothing by the women who do it, even if the man expressed prior that he doesn't want it cut. There's this prevailing attitude that hair doesn't matter as much to men, so who cares if he says no? Cut it anyway. Do it in his sleep. He'll get over it, and we all know that wouldn't fly the other way around. So that quick exchange about Bear's hair hid a sadness in the fact that Nikki couldn't have this one relatively small taste of dominance over Bear to make herself known, because Dickie just capitulated when he said not to do it again, while also highlighting the audacity of Bear to set boundaries for his own personhood without any of the self-awareness that being on the receiving end of Nikki's whims should have imparted. Cause let's be real, if she could cut his hair without him knowing, she could have cut his throat. Yet he still feels he has enough control to ignore the power she exerts over him, whether as Nikki or Dickie. And in a way, he's used to that, given how much power Nikki's always had over him and how willing he is to endure anything just to be with her. I can't remember the last time I saw a film that quietly explored different aspects of dating from more than one perspective, without switching perspective, having a fresh take on the shape of infatuation, while weaving in this horror element of a wish gone wrong. It's doing a lot more than it seems like it's doing on the surface, and without any filler or busyness. The story is straightforward. Nothing has felt excessive or unwarranted so far. The editing is sharp, the dialogue is natural, the scares have appropriate setups, and the leads are selling their roles. What more could I ask for? I'll tell you what, that the last 50 minutes be as good as the first. But I haven't gotten there yet. Returning to the One Wish shit show, things are increasingly untenable in ways that any normal person wouldn't tolerate, though we know Bear isn't normal, and Dickie packs him a lunchbox. Inside, there's a photo of him that says you, and a photo of her that says not me. I assume Nikki added that when Dickie was asleep, and it reminded me of something in one of my short stories that I'm not going to talk about. Now we get to see more of Sarah, who has a crush on Bear, and she confirms that Nikki wasn't into him before, so she doesn't want to see him get hurt from whatever game Nikki is playing, which is depressing given that he's the one hurting her. She also lets slip that Ian is keeping something from him. My guess is that he was with Nikki before the wish. Not in a serious relationship, but sleeping around, because it would be weird if they were actually dating, and he was still encouraging Bear to make a move. So I was intrigued when Ian asked Bear for a ride, because if anyone was going to derail Bear's whole thing, it would be Ian. And he gave it to Bear straight, that it seems like he's taking advantage of Nikki, which Bear denies, again deflecting from his role in all of this by saying Nikki is all over him. Ian doesn't buy it though, so to prove his point, he invites Bear to his place for a party, with the one rule that Nikki can't come. Before that plays out, however, we get further proof that Bear is a point of sale who isn't willing to give up what he's got now that he's got it. He calls a number on the back of the One Wish Willow box, which I guess he still had because he's also a clutterbug who doesn't throw shit out when he's done with it, and he tells them he doesn't want to cancel his wish, he just wants to tweak it. So in case you're still somehow in the dark, stop copying Dickie first of all, but it's not a question anymore. Bear knows his wish worked, which means he knows Nikki's only with him because she's being forced. Yet he doesn't try to stop it right away. His only concern is that she's not being magic trafficked properly. And even when he does finally ask if the wish can be canceled, it's not necessarily for her sake, it's because he wants Nikki to love him for real. Unfortunately, Zach from Bro Support says the wish can only be canceled when Bear dies. And there's a cool moment that makes me expand my theory about Nikki being trapped in the Lunken Place. That's the lady version of the sunken place. Instead of the recesses of her mind, she's trapped in this supernatural pocket dimension of sorts that still has an open connection to her body. And the One Wish Willow folks oversee any souls that are there, like inventory or hell. That's not backed up by the story per se, that's just a little treat for me. I also haven't talked about the fact that the One Wish Willow box makes a noise at key points in the film because I haven't been keeping track of when it happens and I'm not watching this again. So feel free to talk about that or anything else I missed in the comments. In the meantime, Bear heads to the party with Nikki against Ian's wishes because Dickie threw a fit and Bear doesn't know how to handle things, which is another layer of characterization. It reminds us that he's weak, lacking the courage to do what's necessary or to manage his own dysfunction, which is why the only power he has had to be handed to him by a wish. So it isn't just Nikki he can't let go of, it's him feeling like he's in charge of his own life and the direction it takes. It's why, despite everything going on, he no longer confides in his best friend or asks for advice. A part of it is not wanting to be caught or judged for what he's doing, but it's also that he'd rather play it cool, like he's handling his relationship as well as any good boyfriend would, while still deflecting blame for the results. Like blaming the fact that Sarah was going to the party for why he couldn't stop Nikki from going. But we get there, and when it comes to social gatherings, I'm like the wildlife you see running in disaster films before all hell breaks loose. So the first time Dickie Doolally let her freak flag fly, I'd already be hanging by the door so I can slip out when things get dicey. These folks are overly chill, reacting to nothing with appropriate urgency or concern, which in itself is commentary on the nature of relationships. How society coasts on pleasantries while turning a blind eye to the unpleasant the closer they are to it, engaging only as witnesses to the spectacle who murmur about it behind closed doors, rejecting their role as active participants. So it's nice that we get to see people outside of their social square react to Nikki's behavior and how Bear navigates that. Spoiler, not well. And I have to know if Indy can actually frown like that at all, or if it was purely an effect, because I'm fascinated by people whose facial muscles allow the sides of their mouth to turn down. Mine just don't do that. The best I can manage is to look like a skeptical frog. Speaking of just don't doing that, there's a Nikki/Dickie situation, literally, and Bear does nothing about it. He just dissociates like the little bitch he is. And I wouldn't disagree if you argued that Ian and Sarah were also annoying here, because it's not like they aren't Nikki's friends too. If she were a stranger Bear brought over and something happened, it would make sense to expect him to take care of her. But she's not a stranger, and they're in Ian's house, so their focus on Bear taking action instead of just taking action themselves might seem odd. That said, it works for the story, because for all intents and purposes, Nikki is a stranger now, and there's this sense, at least with Ian, who was the most vocal in this scene, and the only one who addressed Nikki at all when she was dickieing out, that whatever's going on with her is Bear's responsibility. Not because he's quote-unquote dating her, but because it's his fault. Like One Wish Willow said when they provided Bear with excellent customer service, he has a moral obligation to be there for her. It's also telling that as an American, I briefly wondered if One Wish Willow pays minimum wage. Skipping forward, there's another scene I appreciate for how the dialogue is written and how Johnston sells it in his delivery. It's nothing dramatic, just the shift from him asking Dickie, "Do you like me?" to asking, "Does Nikki like me?" It's the first time he admits to understanding that Dickie isn't Nikki, but that Nikki is there. And he just wants to know if she's happy, again having that conflicting concern about her well-being while actively seeking something he can latch onto as a form of consent. Something to make him feel less guilty, to make the lie in front of him more real. And the exchange that follows is the first time Dickie admits that it's trying to be Nikki. It loves him. The wish made it love him, but it's not sure how to be this other person who doesn't. I have to say, there's so much tension throughout the film, executed in ways that are obvious to choose if you haven't conformed to the system yet. Too many filmmakers rely on jump scares unearned, meaningless tricks that tease the viewer, music that artificially provokes a reaction, or build-ups they intentionally cut off at the knees as if the frustration of being left hanging is akin to fear. They forget that the scariest things in life aren't always the violent, loud, crazy things. They're also the things you sit with. And obsession lets you sit with it, without being a slow burn. And the scares it does have, it gives you time to take in. Johnston carries a lot of weight in that regard, having to react to things as we react to them, and not a single character in this film has felt fake. I'm usually pulled out of a story when the characters say or do things that feel scripted, and that didn't happen here once. Except it did happen here once because Dickie saying, "It's not darkness, no sweetie, darkness is a color," was dumb. And I don't care if Dickie was trying to make the point to me personally out of everyone who saw this film on Earth that my jokes about her being in the dark don't make sense because it isn't darkness I'm seeing, it's nothing. Maybe she should spend more time trying to write like Nikki than she spends trying to be like her. Also, that whole thing was a veiled threat to kill herself, thus killing Nikki if Bear leaves the house, which is neat. So we're an hour and 23 minutes in now, and it seems I was right. Bear gets up in the middle of the night to meet with Sarah, who wants to talk. And before he leaves, Nikki tells him that Dickie is asleep, begging him to kill her before she awakes. This was maybe one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene in the film, because Bear asks, "What's so bad about being with me?" A line that I felt was necessary to include, and that circles back to earlier in the film when he asked why Nikki was quitting. He didn't care that she was miserable, that she wanted love out of life, real love, because it was just a job. Like this is just a job. What's so bad about working in a music store if it means you get to be with me? What's so bad about being a prisoner in your own body for the rest of your life if it means you get to be with me? How can any job be that bad? How can he be that bad? Setting aside the fact that him even having to ask is a whole bucket of whoosh, Nikki's response sums up everything he refuses to confront. I've never been with you. And he can't accept that. He can't accept that he had her body, not her. No matter how normal Dickie learns to be, without Nikki's consent, she isn't his. And that weighs on him more than Nikki's quiet pleas to be released from her cage. So he heads out to meet Sarah, and the whole time they're sitting in the car, I'm so worried for her, because the medium shot directly facing the window is exactly how you'd frame it if Dickie was gonna run up on a bitch. Did she? You'd know if you watched the film. One thing I like that I don't think I've mentioned yet is how they inject humor into the story without derailing the horror, and you get more of that here. Bear returns to the curio shop to find another One Wish Willow, which I'm glad they added, because one of my least favorite things in a film is when a character doesn't do something they obviously would do just for the sake of propelling the plot. It's even worse when they don't explain why. Bear trying to make another wish is obvious, so even if the movie ends up on a high note, I'd consider it a flaw if that never happened. But it did. And I love that the dude at the counter is just like any other sales clerk, treating the One Wish Willow like any other product you'd get off the shelf. I thought that whole scene was really fun, and the guy's not wrong. There are warnings all over the package. Even the girl who sold it to Bear said some people complain. But Bear says that if people knew their wish would end up that way, that the consequences would be real, they'd never make one. And that's the problem, isn't it? Ignoring all of the warning signs, even in relationships, because we're so eager to be selfish that we don't consider the consequences as if they aren't real. It's also worth pointing out that unlike the monkey's paw, which everyone will probably compare this to, these wishes aren't guaranteed to go sideways. In that story, the monkey's paw is cursed. The whole point of it is to punish you for trying to change your fate. That's why your wish is always granted in the worst way possible. But everything from the store clerks to the website Bear was on to another wish I didn't see before making this point indicates that your wish here might turn out fine. So the fact that the wishing is real isn't the problem. That's just Bear yet again deflecting blame. It's what he wished for that sealed his fate. Something selfish and unattainable, something Nikki could never be, so Dickie clocked in for work. And Dickie sucks. I think I'll leave the plot there for now, because I want to bounce around and talk about some random bits in the film before wrapping things up. And I want you to experience the flow of the final moments yourself. What I will say is that I think everything resolves as it should, and I commend Barker for committing to what's probably the best ending instead of the most commercial one. There's something I knew would come up later, Chekhov's gun and all that, and I don't mean the literal gun. Dickie gave Bear a stone, a tiger's eye that she said would impart confidence and willpower. My first thought was that some part of Dickie was influenced by Nikki to give him the stone in hopes that it would give him the courage to eventually do what needs to be done. Either kill Nikki to set her free, or kill himself to cancel the wish. But it wasn't clear at that point how much Nikki was aware of, so my second thought was that Dickie wanted to give the stone away to prevent Nikki from having the willpower to fight back. And it was certainly more poetic for her to give her confidence and willpower over to Bear, which is apt for abusive relationships, than to throw the stone in the trash. Bear does take the stone out when he needs it later in the film, but it made me wonder how long he had it with him. Because if it works, then he should have had confidence and willpower before that moment, which I'm not convinced that he did. And if it doesn't work, it would explain why he lost his willpower right when it mattered most. Though I'm not sure any of that is relevant to the script, because it's the kind of scene so critical to the culmination of the film that some details can just be ignored. It's also interesting because it reminds me how we perceive things like victimhood as being a zero-sum game. That because Bear is the victim of his own actions, and everything happening to him is a consequence of what he's done to Nikki, we just pretend that the trauma of what Dickie is doing to him doesn't exist. This may not be true of today's version of the internet, where nuance goes to die and everything is distilled down to the most easily consumable binary take on any pop social situation, but in real life, we understand that abuse can be a feedback loop. So two things can be true at once. Where have I heard that before? It can be true that Bear's relationship with Nikki is abusive, while being true that Dickie's relationship with Bear is abusive. It doesn't mean you have to feel sorry for Bear, nor does it mean you're trying to defend him. It's also a horror film. Things don't have to be morally or ethically tidy. They can be horrific. And there is something horrific about a violation so beyond the pale to commit that we can see someone you care about get their face smashed in and their body grotesquely scalped and splayed out in front of you while someone with a gun to your head tells you to love them and still think, well, it's your fault. Stop acting like this is affecting you mentally. Even when Bear considers taking his own life, it's perceived as him being a coward too weak to deal with the problems he caused, not as a victim who wants relief from his suffering. And I don't say that to garner sympathy for Bear, I say it to make the point again that it's both. Nikki and Bear as characters don't exist as a single relationship dynamic. They embody a range of dynamics reflected in these societal Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the film. Ones that different viewers will pick up on or identify with according to their own experiences. The egg of a man who latches on to the first woman who's nice to him. The egg of a woman who's clingy and needs to be told you love her all the time. The egg of a man sneaking out to meet up with another woman who's just a friend. The egg of being the friend who thinks your crush should be with you instead. The egg of a woman not wanting her man to have a boys' night out. The egg of the buddy who doesn't invite you over anymore because he doesn't want to deal with your new girlfriend. The egg of a man who never says he's sorry until it's too late. The egg of a woman who numbs her way through sex to get it over with because she'd rather be anywhere else. The egg of a man who only cares how other people see his woman in terms of how she makes him look. The egg of the couple that hates each other, but neither can walk away until the other walks away, so they're just trapped in this downward spiral of daily routine. Yes, obsession is one story. But it's presented with details that speak to the many stories, often horror stories, that people have about relationships. It shows how wrong someone can be about a relationship even when they're close to it, like Bear not knowing his best friend was sleeping with his crush. It explores how people can interpret the same situation differently depending on their perspectives and motivations, even if it's something we presume is black and white, like consent. It highlights the dangers of infatuation we can all agree on, while reminding us for how long and how frequently we've romanticized unhealthy attachments anyway, like with the song Forever that plays at the end of the film, which is from the 60s. In a small way, it illustrates the maternal role women often adopt with men who lack the desire, ability, or mindset to manage their own well-being. Like packing their lunch, doing their laundry, buying or setting out their clothes, keeping track of their belongings, scheduling their doctor's appointments, making lists of the household needs, reminding them of important obligations and events, or planning out their meals even if they're the ones cooking it. And in a big way, it regrets to inform us that being self-aware doesn't mean you'll do anything about it. The film opens with Bear expressing how agonizing it is to feel as strongly about someone as he does for Nikki. To love someone so much that it feels like you're coming apart, that you choose them over everything, yet he still wished that misery upon her. I'm not saying that all of the above was intentional on Barker's part, just that there's a lot you can read into this film that, story-wise, doesn't have much going on, simply because it was that well conceived. Like the scene when Bear is upset, so Dickie says, "How's this?" and smiles the biggest, most Stepford wife-looking ass smile she could manage in an effort to appease him. He didn't tell her to do that, but the telling was implied by her asking how it is. It's another societal egg, knowing there's often this male expectation that women be content and agreeable no matter how they actually feel to protect a man's peace. And how that manifests even in strangers feeling empowered to tell women to smile, like you're a prop on their stage. If Dickie didn't say, "How's this?" that moment wouldn't be as layered as it was. And that sums up the entire film for me. It isn't the story that's good, it's how it's written, acted, directed, with tiny details that make you think harder. Like the one I told you to put in your pocket and lock it. Did you? The cat. I mentioned it being weird that it managed to get into a bottle of pills, so maybe the bottle of pills was already open. Maybe Bear left it open. Was it recklessness or another example of abuse with plausible deniability? One never knows, do one? But it's a bit of foreshadowing, isn't it? That Bear walks into a huge mess and a dead animal that overdosed on pills, and all he can manage to say is, "What did you do?" Just like Nikki wakes up to a huge mess and a dead animal that overdosed on pills, and all she can manage to say is, "What did you do?" It's the writing that makes this film, not the plot. It was also a nice callback to the cartoon about wanting to wear your skin like a sweater when Dickie is wearing Bear's actual sweater because it smells like him as if it's his skin. On a lighter note, I said that in my headcanon, every mystical item in the curio shop works because I like the idea of a world where magic is openly real, yet it's not a big deal because there's so much skepticism around it that it barely catches on. In that canon, the crystal necklace Nikki lost had some kind of power over her, and we'll never know what it was, only that it ended right after she told Bear that they were running out of time. How about leaving your crystal necklace lore for Nikki in the comments? It also makes me think about how we monetize everything now. If magic were real, which it very well might be, who am I to claim cosmic omniscience, do you really think that would deter us from profiting off it when we're fine profiting off the fact that it's not? The willow tree being enchanted and granting wishes is an age-old story. You tie a knot in a branch, make a wish, then untie it after the wish comes true, thanking the willow for being a lad. Willows are central to all sorts of beliefs and traditions. I only mention that one because it's relevant to the film. And that tickled me too, because not only are we great at commercializing things, we're even better at stripping them of their cultural roots. So respectfully tying a knot in a willow tree to later be gratefully untied turns into snapping a piece of it off to amaze your friends. None of that influenced my opinion of the film, by the way. It's just fun to think about. I said going into this review that I knew Obsession was well received, but I hadn't noticed until it was shoved in my face that the score on Rotten Tomatoes is 94% across the board, mainly because I don't care about Rotten Tomatoes. But it got me thinking about ratings, not the binary kind like thumbs up or down, fresh or rotten, but the kind that's on a scale like 3 out of 5 or C+. I don't like them because I don't mean anything from one film to the next. Two films having the same score doesn't mean I regard all of their elements equally, nor does having a different score reflect what led me to rate one higher than the other. All ratings do is give you insight into how much I liked something or didn't, and my words do a far better job. But there is something unique about ratings. People seem hesitant to give things a perfect score, especially when it's a number. Even if they absolutely love an album, a book, or a film without any complaints, it's like the knowledge that perfection doesn't exist, at least in an objective sense, discourages them from asserting that this particular thing somehow nailed it. And I found myself feeling the same way here. There's nothing I could cite about Obsession that I functionally have a problem with, yet I can't say I'd give it a 10 out of 10. I might give it 5 stars because that feels less like saying it's perfect and more like saying I felt perfectly about it. I also might give it an A+ because that also doesn't say it's perfect as much as it says that it didn't get anything wrong, which isn't the same. But I'd rather stick to my words and say that I enjoyed Obsession for doing everything it did well. It isn't the best film I've ever seen, nor do I know what is. I don't compare things that way. And nothing about it will stay with me like other films I wouldn't call better, like the first Jeepers Creepers. Something about that movie haunted me for years. Or Ravenous with Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle. It's been almost 3 decades since I saw it, and it still pops into my head, especially the music, which was like... I don't even remember if that movie was good or not. I just remember liking it and it's sticking with me. And I just don't think that's going to happen with Obsession, which says nothing about the quality of the film. Because if I were on Rotten Tomatoes, I'd have rated it fresh. But as always, my goal at Stream Come True is to share my passion for storytelling and encourage you to dive into all of the amazing and not so amazing content streaming near you. So if you want to watch Obsession, the links are in the box. Thanks so much for sticking around. Subscribe on your way out, and good night, streamers.